Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Chris Shang, and we bring in different types of leaders and experts from various fields. Today we have HR and HCM practitioner and thought leader in this space, Pamela. Thank you so much for joining us.
Certainly. Thanks so much for inviting me. I was so excited when I got the invitation. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Just a little bit about me. Most recently, I spent over 12 years at Oracle in the HCM space as a VP of HCM transformation, working in the HCM practice. And then I left Oracle to join a startup. And as startups go, it had its issues. And then when that changed, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do next, and people started calling me and asked me if I would do work for them. And I'm like, well, this could work out quite well. And so I'm doing consulting, and I have an affiliation, an association with an analyst firm, 360 Insights. And that's worked out really fabulously in terms of allowing me to take my ideas into the market. And so I work with companies and leaders that are looking for solutions in the HCM space, looking to grow their business, looking to grow their people, and looking to put together a sustainable HCM strategy.
Got it, got it. And for those that aren't familiar with HCM, like the term human capital management, can you talk a little bit more about that and how that's different from the umbrella of HR?
Yeah, sure. So HCM, I think the language came from, we're addressing a marketplace that is largely driven by technology. So people talk about HCM technology. And one of the changes that's happened in the market is all of your HCM work is now coming through some sort of technology solution or engine. You have to have core HR, so people have some core HR technology. You want to have a talent engine of some sort, from attracting people and bringing them into your company and onboarding them to actually helping them succeed, building great careers and finding them opportunities in the company, to how you support those people with your benefits, with your compensation, and with your development strategies overall. So when we talk about HCM, it's kind of like a big umbrella that's over HR, and all the pieces of HR fit under it. And HCM now is, a technology industry that drives success in the company, people, and productivity.
Absolutely. Cool. I'd love to kind of like dive into before we kind of there's a lot of topics we can cover, but
Yeah.
want to kind of just get your origination story, how you got into this space and specifically working with people and talent. Yeah, you've been doing this for a very long time
I
and you've worked with some amazing brands. I mean what I mean by that is like you have like a track record here of like being in this space and
Mhm.
not jumping around to different types of departments, or I mean it's all about building teams and building productivity out of those teams. And so, we're talking about companies like Coca-Cola and Gap and Kraft Foods, a lot of these big consumer brands, again, before Oracle, and then spending a decade plus over at Oracle. Tell us a little bit about what intrigued you into this world in the first place. Did
Well,
you plan to do this like, work in talent and management and people out the gate, or was it something that you kind of stumbled across?
maybe a little bit of both. I had interest in, how do you grow organizations and how do you grow people?
Mm,
And how do you help organizations kind of become the best version of themselves that they could be? And back when I got started, the themes of the day were all about quality and productivity. And I don't know if you remember, we had SPC and we had all of these quality metrics that organizations were trying to implement. And they had the Malcolm Baldrige Award, trying to get companies to follow certain quality standards. And those standards, many organizations still exist today. And I got really interested in that. I was working for a company, R. Donnelly and Sons, and I got really interested in that because it affected everything you did at the plant level. R. Donnelly and Sons was a book printer.
mm.
And if you wanted to print a better book, you had to have better processes. You had to have better ways for people to work together. If you wanted to increase productivity, we needed better teamwork. So I started to get into that, and I got certified in all the things you could get certified in. I mean, at one point early in my career, I taught experimental design in manufacturing so we could design better ways to make a book. And I was fascinated by how those tools could bring people together in ways that improve their employee experience and also improve the business. And you could see tangible signs of it improving the business. And how I got into it was into doing it more broadly was sort of like halfway on a dare, maybe. I was working in one of the R. Donnelley plants in Willard, Ohio, which I had never heard of until I applied for the job at R. Donnelley. In fact, Willard, Ohio reminded me of that movie, Willard. So it was kind of weird.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, I got there, and we started putting in place things that made sense for the business. Like if people had great ideas on how we could improve the process, we implemented them, we tried them, and things got better.
Mm,
And the financials improved dramatically, and we had greater customer success. And so it drew a lot of attention from the company, which was located in Chicago at that time. And the CHRO came to our plant and he wanted to know what we were doing. Like, is it transferable? If you could improve profitability by 54% here, could you do that anywhere? And so he said, kind of on a very flippant, well, if you're doing this here, why don't you come to Chicago and do it for the company?
mm,
And I didn't know if that was a job offer, if he was or if he was kidding. Actually, I had no idea. And so my boss talked to me, and he goes, "No, it was a job offer. He wasn't kidding."
mm,
And so I moved to Chicago, and I started working more broadly across the company, across the book group at the time, and indeed, the things that we did in one small plant were transferable. And we were able to improve the business. And the more you got into how do you improve productivity, how do you cut waste, you get into the people side of it. You can't do this without addressing how people work together
yeah,
and how you manage people and how they're rewarded, and the connections they have to the business. And that's kind of the biggest part of it. I think any transformation is that if you want to improve productivity and financials, it's not a financial issue exclusively. It is a systemic issue. It's a people issue. It's a how do you work together issue. And that's how I got into really the HCM space. Because once you did that for one location and then you could do it more broadly, you then start saying, well, what are the other things we can impact in a positive way?
hmm
And, I spent 5 years at Donnelley doing that really successfully. And then I went off to Deloitte. Someone from Deloitte heard me speak at a conference, and they said, the stories you tell, the results you had were really noteworthy. Would you like to come work with us? So I did, and probably the rest is history, because I went from
yeah,
Deloitte to Coca-Cola. And it's all been about how do you look at transforming a business?
yeah,
And businesses have been through so many waves of transformation and continue. Now we're in a sort of AI transformation. And what does that mean? And trust me, in a year or two, we'll be in some other level of transformation. And so I've been in the HCM business and the transformation business, and I've written about that, and I can kind of tell people where to find some of that. But I am fascinated by how companies and people transform.
hmm
And I didn't start out like, initially when you contacted me, one of the questions was, how did you become a thought leader? I'm like, I just did the work,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I wrote about the work. And there is someone early in my Oracle career, actually from Taleo. Taleo was, for people that didn't know Taleo, they were one of the first talent engines out there for recruiting.
yeah,
And at one point, Taleo recruited a third of all the people for every job in the country. So they were pretty significant. And there was a woman I met there named Haley Vogt. And she said to me one time, she goes, "You should write a book." And I was stunned. I said, "About what?" just write a book. And I was like, oh yeah. And it's one of those things you think are so ridiculous, you put it on your back burner. So I did. And then she came back a little bit later and said, no, really, you should write a book. And so I started playing with, well, what would I write about and what would it look like? And the one thing that stuck out to me at the time was, and I think you see this, Chris, in your own work. Have you noticed that every January, it seems like every consulting firm has some formula or suggestion or something we should do that year? Because we have the year of the employee, we had the year of the manager, we had the year of learning, we had the year of productivity, we'll have the year of AI, we'll have the year of talent acquisition. So they have all these things you should focus on. And I saw companies literally following that advice every year. So, oh, last year we focused on employees. This year we're going to focus on managers. And now we're going to focus on talent recruiting. And it's like, no, I don't think you need to jump around. I think you need to step back and say, what do I need to address? What's going to make this company successful? What will make my people successful? So that gave rise to my first book, which was The Chemistry of High Performance. And it essentially puts all the elements together like a chemical table of the things you can do. Not saying do everything, but the things you can do. Like in your company, is the biggest issue you have talent acquisition? So if that's yes, there's a way to do that. And there are all the chapters you can go into for that. Is it about productivity and performance? If it's that, then here are the chapters for that. So what I tried to give people was choices about what would work for their company. And I think that model still endures today that, there are probably a dozen things any company can do, or 2 dozen or 3 dozen a year. But what are the ones that are going to have the greatest impact and make the most difference?
Mm.
And that, I think, is a question, whether it's business leaders or HR leaders, we have to ask ourselves, every year and continually, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great narrative, great story that you shared. I think like as you're speaking, I'm a go-to-market guy, a sales and marketing kind of guy, growth kind
Mhm.
of guy. And so I think like, what I heard from you is almost like how a lot of earlier stage founders or a lot of like go-to-market professionals think about the TAM, their total
Mhm.
addressable
Yeah,
market.
yep,
It's like this
yep.
big number, right? Which to me is just like it's a vanity metric for investors. It's not really
Mhm.
how to operate your business. Because in reality, you should be going, we call it like a TAM SAM SUM analysis, but you should
Mhm.
actually only be going after a very small percentage of what that total addressable market is. And
Mhm.
you start off very niche, very narrow focused, and you become the best and provide the most amount of value for that small segment. And
Yes.
then you expand from there. I feel like it's very similar in that kind of mindset of like, here's a bunch of things that you can do to optimize your business, but you need to be very narrow focused and pick the one that's going to have the most immediate impact today. Be
Mhm.
very good at that. And then obviously there's lots of ways to be more expansive from there. Is that kind of
Exactly, exactly. And I think one of the things today that every organization should look at is, you've got to be able to deal with the talent and productivity story simultaneously. Sometimes people say, oh, we're focusing on financial goals. We want to improve productivity. We want to improve profitability. And then next year, and I've had people tell me this, next year we'll focus on HCM. And my contention is this: if you're not focusing on HCM to solve your productivity and your profitability issues, you're totally missing the boat.
yeah.
And, McKinsey did this study, and I think you might have seen it on my LinkedIn feed because I thought so much of it, I posted it. So the headline was, what are the right talent metrics for your organization? That was their headline. But what I found amazing is, and this ought to be like, I think somewhere on every wall, every company is, that if you don't deal with the people issues correctly, with talent, with skills, with how you hire people, with how long people stay, with how you engage people in a S&P 500 mid-sized company, that could cost you $480 million a year. And if you went to any CFO, I know you know a ton of CFOs, you went to any CFO and said, I could help you solve a $500 million problem. Are you interested? I mean, I don't know of anyone that would say, no, 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 just keep going. Of course they're interested.
Yeah.
The one of the things that in their study that just stuck with me, and I've talked to so many people about this since then, is, they said for that in companies, if you have one unproductive hour per employee per week, that adds up to $15,000 for that employee.
Yeah.
Now, you and I have been around organizations a while, and I can honestly tell you, I think they have more than one unproductive hour per employee
Yeah.
per week.
Yeah.
I know people that have more than one unproductive hour per day.
Yeah.
So that's what we have to solve for.
Yeah.
We have to solve for how people are connected to the work.
Hmm.
We have to solve for, whether you call it engagement, whether you call it connection. We have to solve for the connection between the person, what the company needs, and the work they need to do to deliver that.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to make a material difference, quite honestly.
Yeah.
And so I was just really struck that if you want to solve for profitability and productivity, you have to start looking at your talent engine and your HCM engine.
Yeah. I mean, I think what you do very eloquently, that I think the reason why the stigma around HCM and talent and people, and that it doesn't tie back to
Mhm,
the profitability or productivity, is I think maybe the ability to quantify human capital, which
mhm.
you've alluded to a few times now by sharing numbers of that. If you don't solve for certain aspects of human productivity, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the disconnect that a lot of people have trouble doing, because I don't think a lot of department leaders
Mhm.
in talent or in the HR space are able to do that effectively, right? I think that's probably the disconnect. And so it's probably created like this narrative for the C level
Mhm.
executives that are, trying to steer the ship of the business, to focus on these other areas where obviously the way that you're thinking about it is very much on the bottom line. It's very much on improving optimization for the margins.
Yeah, I'll tell you something that I would like to send to the email box of every HR leader I know every day. Is about a year ago, it's actually last July. Gallup came out with a study, and there was one statistic in there that should make everyone gasp that's
Yeah.
listening to this. And the gasp is this: they said that 77% of the people in the workforce are just doing the bare minimum. Now, I don't know about you, but when I think of the words bare minimum, I do not think of the excited person that's going in every day saying, what can I do to make a difference? How can I help? How can I put forward my best effort? If you want a picture of somebody that does the bare minimum, call a call center and you get somebody on the phone that could care less if they helped you or not. That's a bare minimum. I'm not going to tell you my bare minimum experience as of late because I'd have to name the company, but we all have had those calls where it's like, can you help me? Can you not help me? That's a bare minimum. And what scares me about the bare minimum is if it goes on too long, people begin to think that's what work is. You just
Yeah.
come in, you do the bare minimum, you go home, and you do it all over again.
Yeah.
I really think we are looking for, we meaning companies in the market, are looking for a way to energize people and to help them focus and to help them make a difference. Because I don't believe anybody takes a job with the intention to say, oh my God, I just got the best job of my career and I'm going to start tomorrow and I'm going to go in and I'm going to see how little I can do and not get noticed.
Yeah.
Nobody says that.
Yeah.
They say that maybe a few years down the road where they've tried everything and it hasn't worked. So, what I challenge people to think about is your transformational journey should say, are people actually just doing the bare minimum? And if your answer is yes, then your choices are, how do I bring them out of that? How do I get from bare minimum to passion? Because passion is what's going to create results for your company.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you're saying, and I
Mhm.
see so many companies battle that, especially like earlier stage. I'm sure that's
Yeah.
probably one of the things that when you're working with that startup was probably one of
Mhm.
the biggest frustrations. It's like, I think that, yeah, everything that you stated would be great. I think a lot of what I'm curious as to how do you start, right? Like, how do you? A lot of this is to me is thinking about culture, and you're bringing about the
Mhm.
idea of transformation and change, which
Mhm.
is a lot of it's psychological. It's a lot of communication. It's a lot of delivery, and it's interacting with people in a way where they become receptive and
Mhm.
and are um, are positive towards that change, right?
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think like, and then when I think about like, I haven't worked in a corporate setting in I don't know for however since my early 20s, and that's
Mhm.
been 20 plus years ago, right? I think like
Mhm.
it wasn't for me because of the fact that I felt like I was a cog in a wheel,
Mhm.
didn't have autonomy, equity, ownership in necessarily the work that I was doing. I think that I learned a lot and I was able to gain certain values out of it and skill sets. But in terms of like passion, I don't know if that was there. I'm curious as to like, how do you, I mean, I almost feel like I think about when we hire people and when I've helped other people, like there's a lot of intangibles and
Mhm.
there's questions that I asked are probably outside of the box of, trying to really understand like I asked them, why are you doing this? If money didn't matter, this is always a question I'll ask. If money didn't matter, what would you be doing with your life?
Yeah.
Because that can help you identify what their actual interests are. And is that actually a good fit for whatever role that they're coming in for, right? I think,
Mhm.
and that's not maybe like a quantifiable thing, but I'm sure that there's more strategic and thought alignment to that in
Mhm.
terms of do that. Um, but how do you address that? Like, I guess I feel like that's, is there must be different steps in terms of how you do it. Meaning first, like assessing or auditing if the
Mhm.
talent is in the right role in the first place. And then obviously you mentioned a lot of other things like the way that processes are documented and making sure that they can be effective and efficient, and then also creating the motivators and the reward to be in alignment with their performance. What are those steps that you look at?
Well, I like the fact that you mentioned assessing the organization or assessing people. Are you in the right place? Are you in the right role?
Hmm.
And I think about that in the context of like there's one trend that started in HR a few years back about we need to, in addition to an external talent marketplace, we need to have an internal talent marketplace. And that came along with lots of challenges for organizations, how to do it. Now there's a lot of technology to help you do that. And I think the thing that's still outstanding is you can have an internal talent marketplace, but you're still left with the question, are you putting the right people can move around? Is it the right person in the right spot?
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, I'm gonna do a shameless plug for a book. And I hope you don't mind.
Oh, of
The
course.
book, hello audience. This book is coming out August 27th,
Yeah.
and it's called The Five Talents That Really Matter. It's by Barry Conchie and Sarah Dalton. And the reason I like this book, they sent me a galley copy to read. And yes, I have been riveted reading a nonfiction book on weekends. It's so good. But here's the thing. They have their assessment methodology does exactly this. How do you get the right person in the right spot?
Mm.
And they have assessments for remote workers. You know, the marketplace has had so much dialogue about are people effective working remotely? Are they productive? Are certain people well suited for it? Are they not well suited for it? And how do you become a really great remote manager? Well, Barry and Sarah actually address this in the book. And the thing that they've done, and this wasn't just a survey to just survey what people were thinking. This was actually a scientific study about the things that really matter and will make leaders successful, make your organization successful. And what they said was it really comes down to five things to be successful. And the first one was you have to have a direction, which makes perfect sense. And then you have to harness energy, which is back to the passion. How do you get started? How do you harness energy? And then the leader has to be able to put all this together and kind of exert some influence to make it go a certain direction because people want a direction. And when organizations don't give it to them, trust me, they'll infer their own and they will go their direction. And then you have to increase the way people connect, which is the answer to what is one of the first steps? You have to connect people. You have to connect them to the work. you have to connect them to the team, you have to connect them to each other. And the more connectivity you have, the more work you have going in the right direction. And
Mm,
finally, the leader's role, if I can say this, is kind of like a traffic director.
mhm,
You have to be able to activate the organization in a certain way at the right time to produce a certain result. And that's the kind of outcome of the book. And one of the other things they do, and I think this is just brilliant because I've not seen anyone out there do this, is so many companies will say, like I had a lot of retail customers at Oracle, and they'd say, we want to be able to create a career path from someone that comes in and starts out like as an entry-level worker in our store or in our restaurant. And we want to be able to grow them to a manager or regional manager or regional director. How do we do that? Well, Barry and Sarah have done a great job in the book telling you how to do that. And they
mm,
actually have an assessment for that. So for all the companies out there that are saying, I want to be able to give people a career path, yes, we have internal marketplace, but now we're going to be able to do it with some kind of architecture around it. So we can help the right people grow to the right jobs, because everyone is not qualified for every job, nor would it be a good career choice for the company. And so that's my rave about their book, because I quite frankly think it's game changing. I think their assessment approach to about how to get started is really game changing.
interesting. Um, Very cool. I will definitely plug that book for you once we push this out.
Okay,
Um,
cool.
Similarly, so we spoke about the assessment part, right? Then I think
Mhm.
the other part of it is I think, like, how do people feel like they are like that passion, I feel like,
Mhm.
comes with some of those words that I also mentioned around, like,
Mhm.
autonomy, ownership, equity,
Mhm.
right? Like, part of the difference of, I think that motivates me, and, having spoken to hundreds of founders, is the fact that you have equity in what you're building. You have a direct outcome from the efforts that you put in, right? You have the risk and reward of that.
Mhm.
And as an employee, how do you generate that similar feeling, I guess, of like that ownership? Because I think that is very much in alignment with the work that they produce, the quality of the
Mhm.
work that they end up producing, as well as that idea of passion
Mhm.
and really, the desire to want to be there.
Well, I want to go back to two things you just said: accountability and autonomy.
Mm,
One of the ways that you get people excited about the work and excited about owning the work is, and this is going to sound trite, you actually let them own the work. And
mm,
this happened in the pandemic. You had some managers that wanted to be very hands-on. Well, hands-on when everybody's in the office looks very differently than hands-on when everybody's sitting in their house.
yeah.
And there were some managers, like I would talk to CHROs, and their managers would want to set like a really strict schedule. Like, you must be at your laptop at 8 o'clock. You can take a break at 10 o'clock. And I'm like, oh, for God's sakes, give it up. Nobody's going to do that. They have kids at home. They have things to do. But what you have to do, and this goes back to how do people own the work? You have to be clear about what the endpoint looks like. This is where we're going. This is what we're trying to do. And this is your job, your piece of that. So the way that you create ownership is you state a clear direction, you connect the work people do to that direction, and then you get out of the way and you create a relationship, check-ins and conversation. It shouldn't be a formal check-in, it can be a just conversation where I ask you, how are you doing? How can I help? Is there anything that you need? When you set a bold direction and you ask for people's best ideas and help them get there, that's how you create ownership.
Mm,
That's how you create the excitement and passion for the work. And look, people want to be excited about the work.
yeah.
They want to be excited about what they're doing. They want to be passionate. And most organizations and managers need to learn that part of creating that is being clear up front about where you're going, and then getting out of the way and helping back here, helping, like, how can I help, what do you need? And I think that That is one of the best ways leaders can help empower their teams. There's so many books written about team empowerment and what are the 5 stages to empowerment. You want to empower somebody, ask them to bring their best work, their best idea, their best selves to work, get their ideas, and help them implement them and get out of the way.
Mm,
And maybe some people will think that that's Pollyannish. I don't think it is. I've seen it work. And to your point about, there is nothing more rewarding than being excited about something that you see come to fruition. There really isn't. And that's what people are looking for. They're looking for this. I want to have the best experience I can have at work.
yeah. As you're speaking there, I had I have a question that's maybe a little bit outside the box or out of left
Mhm,
field. Is that, we went through this, and maybe this is also part of the issue of what we're seeing right now is
mhm.
one of the metrics that you talked about right before we started this call around, what percentage of people are actually looking for their next job.
Yeah.
But before we dive into that, so, there was this notorious talk a few years ago around companies like X or Twitter before
Mhm,
that, for the acquisition, and then Facebook and Google, where they would bring on developers and pay notorious amounts of money, right?
mhm,
And they would have zero, they wouldn't be really doing much of anything. It was more so of like pooling talent so the competitive landscape couldn't get access to that talent.
mhm.
Obviously, that was short-lived because we then ended up having a lot of these large companies do a bunch of different rounds of layoffs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I gotta think that if you are the person who went into one of those roles, that you knew that this probably isn't a sustainable model of some
Mhm,
sort, right? Like, and what you're actually, the I guess the fluff of your job title and your position,
mhm.
because your day to day is probably busy work, or you can probably skate by. A lot of them were just talking how easy it was to skate by, and some
Mhm.
of
Oh, yeah.
and like, all that. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that? And what are your thoughts on, I guess more importantly, did that lead to some of the things that we were just talking about? Like, were those any of that, do you feel like is a catalyst to what we're seeing now, which is I think a trend and very conscientious direction towards optimizing existing talent,
Mhm.
or leaning down to the point of maximizing productivity? Obviously, you have the big question of AI there too,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
giving you a tool, maybe also an excuse to then also like limit, like condense teams.
Yeah.
I think it kind of all plays together, but that's a bit of a loaded question, but like take all that as you will, and your thoughts.
Okay, first of all, I love the question because when this was happening, I was doing presentations and decks on what collapsed, because the story of we hired, 1,000 extra people so no one else would get them. They were pervasive in the marketplace, and it was a number of companies. It just wasn't one company. And the flip side of that was when you listen to the stories of people, they talked about, I thought I took this job to get XYZ experience and learn these things. And I got there and there wasn't an XYZ experience and there wasn't things to learn. And I had to look for work, um, and I didn't have anything meaningful to do. And they also said, well, yes, but I was making a lot of money, and it was hard to leave the money, but I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't learning anything. And eventually, as happens in these situations, those things collapse and the market sort of readjusts itself. And so, one company would fire 10,000 people or have a reduction of 10,000 people. And 3 months later, we're hiring 5,000 more, but with different skills because we didn't hire with the right skills. And it's a blah, blah, blah story. And you're like, what an incredible waste of human energy, of money, of strategy and strategic intent and time. And this whole notion of I'm going to overhire so nobody else gets it, I'm like, seriously, that's your best play right now? What about engaging work? What about doing something meaningful? So I think that was kind of a market mistake that maybe has adjusted itself out to a great degree, maybe not to some degree.
Mm,
But the notion that people won't care if they're not doing anything meaningful if you pay them enough, I don't think that held true in all cases, in a lot of cases. And people did want to do meaningful work. And to address AI for a moment and how that's going to change the workplace, I was at a conference at the end of March. It was the I Am Phenom conference, and Mahi Bayeretti is the CEO of that company, and he was addressing, the notion of what's AI going to do, and where does it play. And one of the things he said that was just so impactful, he said, "Yes, AI can do all of these things, but AI can't fall in love."
mm,
And at the end of the day, you need the human element more than ever when you have AI, because there are judgment things to be decided. You have to look at the impact on people's jobs, on people's lives, and how that's going to go. And that's not an AI decision, that's a human decision. And I love the notion that AI can't fall in love, because it can't. And so the passion we see from somebody that is just excited about the work isn't AI, that's human, that's them. And I really think we have to look at that. Now, can AI make certain things easier? Of course it can. There are people that are doom and gloom people that say, AI is going to take over the world at a certain point, and we'll all have no choices. It'll be AI running everything. I, I can't. I don't have enough of a window into the future to say is that true or not true. But what I can say is you can never underestimate the human element in a company. You can never underestimate the connection and the passion that people can bring to work. And if you start underestimating it because you think AI could do it for you, I think you're missing an opportunity to create passionate places to work where people can be their best selves.
yeah. Yeah. I think, I mean, I was kind of like going into like this dystopian future of because I think like I mean, I think when I think about the human population in
Mhm,
large, right? I think, a lot of things that you're saying, a lot of things that we're talking about, I think it's, those are ideal outcomes, right? That's like ideal situationals and circumstances and how I think most companies should run.
mhm,
But then I think about, I don't know. I mean, I feel like just the human condition and think about generationally, I think like there's a lot of there's the majority of the population that isn't thinking in that ideal mindset.
mhm,
Maybe doesn't even think about passion. Like thinks about work as work, and it's the place that they clock in and clock out. There's so much of that, right? And they live for the weekends. That's a very normal way some people look at their 9 to 5s, right?
yeah, yeah.
And, and I mean, yeah, and I think that when I think about AI, I think of those people in that middle chunk are and obviously the other end of that spectrum are like the ones that are at risk, the biggest risk to be displaced, like with technological advancements, because they're not. I believe in this too, which is like they're not learning what is readily available to learn,
Mhm,
to either be involved in the creation and the building of the infrastructure or the technology,
mhm,
or on the flip side, you're not asking any questions, you're not learning anything, and you're just going to be the consumer of that
mhm,
technology, right? And you have that too now, which I think like most people still with tech, and I'm sure that you have a lot of visibility around this too from being in senior leadership roles, is like there's still a lot of people out there that just are freely giving away their data and not even have any inkling of how much data they're actually giving away.
yeah,
You
I think
and
that's true.
that's just with the internet. That's not even with
Mhm,
running queries into AI that's actually now learning your behavioral patterns and how how you, I mean, it's models, right? It's like
mhm,
learning from human model of like how you ask questions, how you think in your logic based systems, right? And so if people don't start asking those types of questions, around what I'm doing actually feeding into the larger picture of things. I do think that there's, that's where I think there could be ultimately trouble. If the larger population does pick up and wake up and think, I think, like have a sense of urgency to learn these things and then conscientiously is going through that behavior. I think it's a different narrative than it is to 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 then just turn a blind eye to it.
Yeah, I think you raised a good point. We're very early days in this.
Yeah,
Speaking, the outcome hasn't been written yet. The book hasn't been written yet about what's going to happen at the end, at the end of 5 years or 10 years. But what I see as possible, because I think you have to look and say, what is
yeah,
possible when we start going down this road? Is it possible for people to learn these things? I think, yes. I think if you connect people with that learning, there's an excitement about it and they do want to learn.
yeah,
There are so many things you can get on the internet now for free, so many classes you can take for free, whether Microsoft has them and other people have them as well. You can learn about this, and those classes are really heavily subscribed. And I think it's like anything else, we're starting here, and then there's like, we're wondering a little bit, is this going to take? What are people going to do? And then you're going to see an uptake. I really think you're going to see an uptake, and people are going to want to learn. They're going to want to figure out what's impacting their lives and how they can have some interaction with that. And, we all have the AI example of, you buy something online and then they're going to predict what you're going to buy next. And you want to say, no, I might have bought the shoes in black, but today I don't want to buy them in blue. Let's move on. And so, people have those very elementary experiences, whether it's with retail or whether it's with sites that they go to, and they're kind of learning that way what that might look like. But at the end of the day, I do think there is a human capacity to grow and learn, and we
yeah,
will see a lot of that uptake in the market. And then I think you're going to see people that are like, no, I don't know if I want to do that. I may want to do something else. And we're going to see that too, because it's never one or the other. There's always like a landscape of options for the way things happen and the way people interact. But I have faith in the human condition. I have faith in organizations that they will do the right thing, that they will grow their people, that they'll want to get people in the right jobs, because that's the only sustainable future you can create. Because whether you believe this or not, the reality is we are in a forever talent shortage. And if you think about just open jobs and people, we don't see signs of demographic easing till after 2050.
yeah,
And frankly, at 2050, this will be someone else's problem to solve.
yeah. Or
But the
something
reality is
else's
you
problem.
don't have enough people. You don't have enough people. And there's a
Yeah,
great article that came across my phone today. It said, oh my gosh, we don't have as many open jobs as we had before. And I'm like, well, what happened? Well, we have about 8.5 million open jobs we can't fill. I don't think the fact that we have a little less open jobs, which we never had the people to fill them anyway, is a crisis. I think it's an opportunity to say, what is actually required to fill these jobs and how do we get there? How do we develop the people for that work?
interesting. Interesting. I'll leave it on that note because I could go down a rabbit hole. I have different. This is going to be too tangential. So, but I think you spoke and you left on a very positive note, very much more empowering and inspirational to the human condition than I think some other things that I would bring up. But I want to say thank you so much for taking the time today. It was a very intriguing conversation, to say the least.
Yeah, for me too. Thanks so much for inviting me. And I'd love to come back again.
Of course, we'll do for sure. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Bye bye.